Welcome everyone, it's officially 6 p.m. on October 29th, 2024. Welcome to the Charter Review Commission meeting for the City of Bernie, Texas. I'm going to open up with the agenda item number 2 for public comments. Obviously nobody signed up, so we will move on to agenda item number 3, introduction of commission. And so what we'll just do is, I would like to do is everybody just go around the table. We'll start with me and then we'll just go clockwise, I guess. How long have you been in the city of Bernie, why you want to be here, and what your role has been in the city of Bernie as a public service or as a city council member, or what you just do, just kind of everybody gets familiar with everybody. So my name's Frank Ritchie, I'm the mayor of Bernie, Texas. I'm also a business owner, pastor. I've been in Bernie for almost 30 years now. So,
Ron Cisneros, insurance broker, and moved to Bernie first time in '99, and then I moved away a few years ago, about 5 years ago, and came back 3 years ago now. I'm former city councilman.
Ty Wallison, city councilman for District 1, mayor pro tem. Been in Bernie a little over 10 years, married into it. My wife's family's been here almost 30 years. Small business owner in downtown, committed to continue to make this the best place to live.
Linda Zartler, former assistant city manager for the city of Bernie, former city secretary. I worked here for 24 years. I've lived in Bernie since 1989 and did about 24 years of service here. I think that's correct. Raised 2 kids. I've been in District 2 and moved to District 1 about 5 years ago.
And the previous chair.
Yes, I was previous chair of the 2020 Charter Commission. Along with Stan Leach, he was on that.
Joe Macaluso, retired physician surgeon, councilman District 5 for the last 6 years. Bernie full-time resident for over 18 years, been coming here for over 35 years. I'm here because I was asked to be here. And because we did this already in 2020, so we have some idea what to expect.
I'm Lori Carroll, city secretary. Been with the city almost 22 years now.
Ben Thatcher, city manager, 4.5 years in Bernie. This is the 3rd city I've worked with. I think this is either the 4th or 5th charter review experience I've had. I've done 2 others with other cities. This will be the 2nd one here in Bernie. It's always a fun opportunity to look at the governing document for the local government.
Quentin Scott, been here for about 16 years, with another few years early on when I got to Texas about 22 years ago. Been serving on city council for probably my 6th year, maybe, somewhere around. It's all washed. I don't remember exactly when I got on and started. It was right behind Ty. Do you remember when you started?
Be 6 in December, so I think you're.
Okay, so maybe I was 5.
That's right.
But anyway, we've been here for 15 solid years, and looking forward to changes in the future.
Okay, I'm Mick McCamey, I'm a city attorney. I've been representing Bernie in litigation since 1993, right before I lived up. Anyway, this is my 2nd stint as the city attorney. I've been interim 3 different times, including during the start of the last charter thing, I believe. Anyway, I was co-city attorney with my partner Susan Rocha when we did the first charter in '95. But I don't live in Bernie, unfortunately. Just come here whenever I can. I love it.
Danny Zeke, assistant city manager, 24 years in municipal government. This is my 4th city, and I've been here for the last 3 years in the assistant city manager's role.
Brad Bunker, District 4 City Council rep. I've lived in the Bernie area for 51 years. First 6 years inside the city limits, and then the last 17 years inside the city limits.
Joe Bateman, moved to Bernie 2.5 years ago, but I'm a 7th generation Texan. I grew up in Central Texas, like to tell people Old Austin. And then I moved here because I wanted to have an environment to raise my family like I grew up in. So I have a kid that's in 8th grade at Bernie Middle School North, and I have a 10th grader at Bernie High School.
And you currently serve on?
The Historic Landmark Commission, yes I do, as of this year, that's correct.
I'm Kyle Mickelson. We've been here since 2006, raised all 5 of our kids here through the Bernie ISD system, and got one more at home. Lots of community involvement informally, and so I'm happy to be here to help with this commission, so I was invited to be here.
Sharon Wright, City Council, District 2. I moved to Bernie from Bulverde 2.5 years ago. I've frequented Bernie for the past 25 years. I got stationed at Lackland just about 25 years ago, and found Bernie in a day trip guide and couldn't stay away from it after that. I'm a nurse practitioner. I love to serve my community, and one of the things that we're really encouraged in my profession is community service, and so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. So 10 seconds, Stan texted me and said he's on his way.
Stan did?
Yeah, so. All right, moving on. Thank you, everybody. Review rules of procedure. I think I'm gonna turn that over to Ben or Lori, whichever one, to kind of discuss what we're gonna do here.
I think maybe we'll tag team this as a slide. You advance that mic. Just quickly, I want to thank everyone for your time and willingness to serve on this effort. Just to give some brief history about our charter. Many of you probably already aware, this is the fundamental, most important thing that dictates how we are organized and how we run our government, right? It's our little mini constitution. Of course, the state, we're a creature of the state. We have to follow state law, but they have allowed and empowered us, because we're home ruled, to create our charter, which was done, as Nick said, back in 1995. In 2012, we amended the charter when we moved to single districts, so we had to note that in the charter. But we have not really reviewed the charter until 2020, from 1995 to 2020. And I think we started that, Linda, as you were the chair. The council created, do you remember how many members were on that?
I think it was about 12.
About 12, but there really wasn't council members on that committee. It was purely, citizens coming together. And so Linda did a great job of chairing that with Stan, or is it just you?
Stan was on there also.
He was on there. We had a lot of other longtime residents who understood the history and the culture of Bernie. So that was really, I don't even remember how many meetings, but that was a very thorough review, and so much so that we had 13 different propositions. We had to clarify a lot of the language to modernize it to make it in accordance with state law. And all 12 of the 13 passed. The one proposition you see up there had to do with terms, extending the city council terms from 2 years to 3. You see how many people voted for that and how many voted against it. There's actually specific proposition language in there that, if we, depending on what this group recommends, the language in those propositions can make or break what you put before voters. And so Mick can talk about that here in a minute. So here we are. I will tell you, we're going to talk about the charge here that you have. But when we talked about the charter, potential charter review with City Council, as I went and asked my staff, there wasn't a lot of things, there wasn't anything from a staff perspective that needed to be looked at because of how thorough the last charter review was. So this is going to be an exercise in looking at our governance, right? There's been so much that has occurred and happened in our community. The population was 10,000 in 2010. It was 17,000 when I got here in 2020. We're about 23,000 to 24,000 now, right? And so we need to think in terms of maybe the governance culture around in which we organize and run the government and look and see if there's anything that needs to be modernized in that effort. I believe that's kind of how council's conversations occurred back in June when we had a robust conversation on this. Next, Mike. All right, Lori, do you want to talk through this?
Sure, yeah, I just added some of the things that are necessary, as far as the process, when ordering a special election. So, once the commission decides on the amendments, if any, it would have to still go to council, to vote on for their consideration. The legal will prepare the ballot language. And then the ballot language goes to Kendall County to prepare for the ballot. Kendall County, for those of you who don't know, they conduct all of our elections for us. So in addition to possibly the special election, we'll also have council elections that's on the same ballot. The propositions, we'll also have the factual communication on the city's website and social media, so we get the correct information out to our citizens. The propositions must be in the newspaper twice, 2 consecutive weeks. And then, so the deadline to order our election is February the 14th. The regular council meeting before, that falls on a Friday, so the regular council meeting that we would probably call the election February the 11th. So we can always call it earlier if, we get everything done, but that's our deadline.
Thank you, Lori. So depending on how things work, we'll go over the resolution, the charge here in a minute. The thought is we'll have as many meetings as we need, as this committee needs, feels like you need, in hopes that maybe we can come to a landing spot before Christmas, maybe even before Thanksgiving, depending on the scale of what you're looking at. And then at that point, maybe after the new year, we'll have a presentation at a city council meeting where this group talks about the process, where you landed, and then council can decide to call that election. For purposes of this, hey Stainer, for purposes of this group, the mayor will serve as the chair of the committee. If the mayor is rendered unable to attend, Ty as mayor pro tem will serve in that role. Staff, myself, Danny, Mitt, Roy, we're kind of ex officio. We're here as just to answer questions. Feel free to ask us our experience or thoughts, but really this is a conversation that you'll go through, an exercise that the mayor will facilitate section by section. In the resolution that council acted on in calling for this commission, they made it very clear they wanted, at a minimum, to look at section 3 and section 4 of the charter. That really has to do with the governance piece of city council and the elections. But there was a catch-all. If you feel like there's any other aspect of the charter you want to look at, we have the ability to do that. Mick, anything you want to add? You've done this multiple times with lots of cities. Anything you want to emphasize for this group?
As far as the procedures go and so forth?
Procedures.
Well, one thing, I think later in the agenda, we're going to talk about a schedule for meetings and how to do all that. I think it was anticipated, the way I understood it, it was going to go through the charter itself, section by section as we go, in addition to the main charge of the council. And you may want to consider doing that with 3-member committees, so everybody doesn't have to delve into each one. That's up to y'all on how to do that. This particular case, it may be fine for everybody to make notes on parts of the charter and bring them forward at the next meeting, but that's something you might consider. Do we want to work with subcommittees on some of this, with the 2 main charges of the council being everybody working on? This year I've done the Fredericksburg City Charter that was amended, and I did the legal on that. It was amended in May, and they were where Bernie was in 20. They hadn't done the big change, and so there were 21 propositions on that ballot that all passed. And with Amarillo, their ballot is on in November, and it's very similar to what we're talking about here. They have a proposition to increase the size of the council and one to change the terms. So it's really important that everyone in the committee feel comfortable speaking up and participating. You are entitled to talk to your fellow citizens about all this, if you wish, but bring your concerns to the group as a whole when you have any that come up from the community. That's very valuable. We'll talk later about what happens if you have a proposals to go to the council and the council decides, yeah, let's put these on the ballot, and what your role is at that point. We're a little bit too early to discuss all that. But as far as the study of the charter itself, I think right now the initial meeting, the important things are we gonna go through everything one at a time together? How often are we gonna meet? Do we wanna assign some things to subcommittees, anything like that? And then
Can I ask a
after
question?
everything, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So since we really just did a very thorough charter review
Yeah.
in 2020, I mean, is there a way do we need to go through line item by line item of the charter review? I mean, if there's things that, obviously, if there's things that the residents and the community members want to talk about, we can. But my suggestion would be, I think, with what we talked about with council, was mainly focusing on sections 3 and 4.
Yep.
That if we focus on those two sections, and everybody has a copy of the charter, if there's something that they want to read on their own or look and engage, and then come back at the next meeting, and be like, hey, I really want to go over section 5 or section 6.
Yeah, and I think that's the best process. They have everybody, after this meeting, take your copy of the charter and skim over it, go through it. And again, be willing to talk to your fellow citizens about these things. And then, like you said, Mayor, those two main items are what we're here to work on.
Didn't mean to interrupt, I just.
No, that's fine, and I think that's better, and we've got a fairly short time frame because we have the holidays built in for your meetings, so, yeah, that'll work great. If there are propositions you'd like to have drafted, that's my job, along with the rest of the staff, but to make sure that they would comport with state law on how charter amendments work. And as Ben mentioned, there are some considerations on how they're presented to the electorate when we get that far, but we can do all the drafting and get samples from other cities, whatever you need. And I know Lori's got a lot of examples already. So that's all I really got to say today.
It might be worth, Kyle, do you have a question?
Yeah, so, I understand that a full review happened, back in 2020, and, you said 12 of the 13 resolutions or changes passed?
12 of the
12
proposed propositions passed.
Would it make sense to review what those were at some point, and rather than review the whole thing, but have they been beneficial, or do those need to be?
Yeah, in the charter, it does talk about when things were amended. Like, if you look at section 3.07, it has parentheses as amended by voters in this.
Okay.
So you can see the notation there. Same thing for section 3.03. Good question. And maybe we just take a moment and ask, I'm gonna put Linda and Stan on the spot. Maybe if you can recall back all that work, what your perspective and thought was. And
It's hard to remember yesterday.
Well, Linda, you can remember better than you do yourself. Well, it's positive overall because like you said, we were 12 out of 15, I believe. How many we win?
Oh, we had 13 is what we did. We might have had a couple others, but.
No, we only did fourth, 13.
13,
12 of them
past 12, and then the only one we lost was the term.
Term limits.
And,
Term.
well, we wanted to go from 2 to 3 was what we proposed. The good news is, we got everything besides that, but that was the only thing that, we had a lot of discussion. And the main reason why we wanted is because, one, money, cost, and then just didn't want the people to continue to, wanted them to do something besides run for election. And that was, we had a high consensus with that. Because just thought that, you win and then a year later you gotta run again. I didn't think it's healthy for the position and didn't think it was healthy for the community. We're at a size now with all the stuff that 3 years is enough. A lot of the, I guess, a little bit of the, opposition was that we were trying to, make it where it was harder to get something out, but that really wasn't the reason. The reason is we want them to do their job instead of running for reelection.
Yeah, by the time someone comes into office, they're basically getting their feet wet unless they've been at council meetings. And it takes a little education period, and you get in May and boom, you're thrown right into the budget cycle. Staff's done a lot of preparation, but it's all new to the individual. So you continue on and you next thing you know, you've got elections and somebody else, maybe one of your other district members is running or not running, and you have someone new. And so it's just a training period. So 3 years would give you a chance to be acquainted with the position, acquainted with what you're going to do, and make good informed decisions.
And it's more of a norm, 3 years. 2's too quick. I mean, I can't imagine, by the time you sign up again, you kind of know what you're doing. You got your legs. And so that was a disappointment, but in the broad scheme of things, there was a lot of things passed too. But that was the big rock.
I'll note that we don't have the exact proposition language for that proposal, but in it said, hey, we propose going from 2 to 3 years, but we're gonna have 3 council members 1 year, 3 council members another year, and then a year where no one was on the ballot.
Right.
And, that could have influenced something, really how you vote, how you word this, and we don't necessarily have to define that if this group chooses to do that. Mick can speak to how that works as we get through that section.
And I'd say a large demographic of people I'm friends with that voted for everything else did not vote for that, because their concern is if you get someone in who's not who you'd like to be in, then they're in for longer. So it's an interesting perspective for that.
So exactly. So here's the deal. We're about to get to that section. We'll get to that charter probably. That's in section 3. Anything else on rules of procedure? Maybe you want to talk about the meeting schedule, and then we'll turn it over to the mayor to.
Yeah, sure. As far as the schedule, we were looking at tentatively November 5th as the next meeting. That is a Tuesday, so, that might be.
A week from
Election day, right.
Election day, yeah.
Yeah, there's no election here though.
There is election here. We wouldn't be in this room. We'd be council chambers, I think.
So, I know that might be an issue with Paula, so I don't know if we wanna, does Thursdays work better for everyone?
I already had Tuesday on my calendar.
Yeah, you kind of saved that date, but.
I can get an alternate potentially. I just have to go petition my neighbors.
So, we were trying to do, the weeks after our regular council meeting, so.
Let us know if you can't, because the committee was already approved by the council by resolution. I don't know if we need to change that. So please reach out and see if that is an open next week. Because we may, if you do have an alternate, we'll probably need to have that on the next council meeting to amend that, I guess.
That's all I have.
So November 5th is the next one.
November 5th, and we'll do 6 o'clock again. Like Dr. Mack alluded to, this is a polling location, this room here, so we'll probably be in the council chambers. Either that or the executive conference room, but on the other side of the building.
It's election, now we'll be serving cocktails.
Will there be parking? Will there be parking?
Yeah,
I think so. By 6 o'clock,
By
I would
6
think
it will.
so.
This parking lot blocked off? Okay.
Depending on how things look, maybe we reserve some spots or something.
I'll let you know,
I don't know about you, but I think everyone else has voted already,
But I've seen those early voting locations and they're packed, so.
Yeah, they are.
They're almost at 50% already.
That's good.
Registered voters. What'd you say, 49? 49%?
That's almost it.
Just kind of call that true. That's pretty good. All right. Well, I guess we'll move on to agenda item number 6, the actual review of the charter. I just want to say before we get into this charter review, like I said, we mainly want to focus on sections 3 and 4, and I think that's where we're going to jump to. standing right here at the beginning when we were talking about this, but, take the charter home, review it, if there's something in there that you wanna get clarification on, or you think we need to change, by all means, we'll bring it up, we'll discuss it, there's nothing that we're not gonna talk about here. I do wanna say that we actually are calling this together because I'm the one that kinda spoke to Ben about just what you were saying, Linda, and what you were saying, Stan. You know, I'm a year and a half into the mayor of Bernie, Texas, and finally get my feet underneath me, and next thing I know is, one, am I gonna run again, and two, am I gonna run an election campaign, and so luckily for me, the answer is no on that, so, you know, I am gonna run again, but I'm not gonna campaign.
To clarify that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I am gonna run again, but I don't do, I didn't do last time, I did this time, but it really is, right? I mean, I look at these guys, the amount of time and effort that the city staff puts in to making this one of the best cities in the state of Texas, and to come in as a new person, as a council member, to see it all work and efforts, and not really give it its due justice by understanding what's going on, because you're right, we go right into the budget process, and you're kind of like looking at everything, a deer in the headlights, but now this last budget process, I'm like, we've got a good head on our shoulders, we kind of understand how this thing works and what's going on, and then you have a chance to make a difference in your community a little bit longer, you know. I know you guys were talking 3 years, and we can talk about that in a little bit, 3 years, 4 years, but I think one of the things, and Ben and I kind of talked about this a little bit too, I don't know how hard we push the idea and the reasoning behind the term limits, you know, but that's something that we were, not term limits, but the extension of the terms, but that's something we plan on doing a better job of communicating the why and the how and the reasoning behind it to the community before it comes to election. Because we're not putting, hopefully we're not putting 13 propositions on the ballot, you know, maybe just a couple, so. All right. That being said, let's turn to page 6. No, wait, yeah.
6.
Is it 6? Yeah, 6. City Council and Mayor, Section 3 of our charter. We'll go through these line item by line item. Do I need to read everything out loud, or can we read that?
Not necessarily, you know.
Not necessarily. All right. So section, well, I think it'll just be easier, honestly. So, section 3.01, general powers and duties. All powers of the city shall be vested in the city council, except as otherwise provided by law in this charter, and the council shall provide for the exercise thereof and for the performance of all duties and obligations imposed by the city, on the city by law. All right. Any questions or concerns on 301? 302 is going to be one of the main topic items that we're going to talk about, the number selection and terms amended by voters May 12, 2012 and November 3rd, 2020. The city council shall be composed of the mayor and 5 council members, collectively referred to as the members of city council, and individually as mayor or council member. Each serving 2-year terms, each council member shall qualify and be elected by district, such districts being numbered 1 through 5. Each council member shall be elected only by the voters residing in the area represented by the district in which the candidate seeks to be elected. Every registered voter in the city shall be entitled to vote for the one candidate for a council member for the area represented by the district in which the registered voter resides. Every resident voter in the city shall also be entitled to vote for the one candidate for mayor without disregard to the district in which the voter resides. So this is really our main topic item here. So I'm going to open it up. If anybody has anything, you kind of already heard what I thought about, the reasoning behind and changing the charter and the idea of the reasoning behind the term limits, or I keep saying term limits, terms. So I'd love to hear everybody's input, yay or nay, thoughts, reasoning.
I mean, we voted for it in 2020, so I still support it.
We tried to do it. I mean, Mike, I think it's probably true for Tom and for Quinn. I've been, this is my 6th year in the council. I have had 5 elections in 6 years. 5. Because I ran in 2018 against Tim, and I lost. And then he became mayor, and I ran again in 2019. Then I had to run immediately for re-election in 2020, because it was not a full term. Then again in 22, then again in 24. So I mean, I think, now granted, I'm retired, but I mean, you're not. I mean, it's a pain. And I mean, you fight it because we've gotten bigger, the misinformation, the slanderous comments on social media have gotten worse and worse and worse. Now it's a narrow, confined, little dirty dozen, if you will, something like that. But I think 2 years is crazy. It takes you that long to figure out all the ins and outs, state law, county, city interaction, police, fire. I mean, I think 3 years, 4 years frankly is the norm, but I'm not sure the public here would swallow 4 years. They didn't swallow 3 years. And the usual suspects will be up in arms about 4 years that we're trying to, I don't know what they think we're trying to do, but I think it's reasonable. We thought it was reasonable last time, Frank.
No, I think also, Lori, when's the filing deadline? It's like in November or something like that,
Oh,
December?
To file,
Yeah, for,
February.
February 14th is the last day to file, January 15th.
so when's it start though?
Of
So
January
when's it
15th.
open? That's the deadline.
January 15th.
January, like 5 months of campaigning,
Mm.
right? Of the 2 years, 5 of the 24 months of campaigning as well.
Yeah, I've spent just as much time, I've ran as
Yeah.
elections just as many times as you have. I've
I was
had,
gonna
every election has been contested. And now I'm down just to two supporters separate me from, being on the council. Like I think my supporter over here, he was one of his voters. Two of his kids voted at like the last 5 minutes of the day. They put me over the top. But, I think the 3 years is important. Mostly, I think the best reason for this, other than just the consistency of being on council, would be for having an opportunity to put two members of council in each particular year, two, and a mayor, and other, which would give an opportunity that 2 members of council could be swapped out, if you had 2 incumbents and they were old. It wouldn't disrupt a majority. I think this last election was the first time we've ever had so many contested elections at once, and it happens. It could happen every 4 years is our current cycle, but I think there's a particular problem with it. An opportunity of, I would say it was an outside group of agitators trying to support a total swap of the council, and to have a majority of the council swap in one given year, I think is problematic. I think we should be more, I'm not against change, but maybe change should just be a little more slowly, versus, just having it. And I'm not saying any of those people that may have taken our spots were gonna do anything drastic for council or anything like that, but from a perspective of, just keeping, projects going, it takes a long, I've had things that I wanted to do on council since day one, and they still ain't getting done. And so, things that you might wanna do, it just takes a long time, and if you had 3 years, maybe we could get something done. But I think swapping out, my suggestion is that's probably our biggest problem that I saw. And I think because of the way that campaign was run that last time, I think a lot of people looked at, because they used the same language, same colored signs. I think a lot of people looked at it as like, wow, they want to swap out, the entire council at one time. So, as when I was knocking doors and talking to people, I heard a lot of concerns about that from folks. And so I think that is one of the good reasons that it could be presented to people of a good reason to have this would be spread out, council and the mayor, 2, 2, and 2 over a 3-year period. You have 3 elections each one. Then you, at the worst, you have 2 new council members at a given time, and maybe over a 2-year period, you have 4 council members that are swapped out or changed. And if that's how the community wants to do it, and I think that's a good, over a year period, over a 2-year period, let the will of the people be, whatever it may be, but I think it just gives an opportunity to have a little more cohesiveness over a year-to-year basis for council.
I agree, and it adds to continuity, but you said the people you talked to that voted against this, and if you look at all the other propositions, they weren't close, but that one was, and it was voted against, so a substantial people voted against it, and their concern, according to you, was they didn't want that length of time, right? So to your point, I agree, it adds to a lot more cohesiveness and continuity by spreading it out over time. That's exactly the people voted against it.
But Mick, what you said earlier was that 1 year it was skipped. Is that what the language was for the voters? You said that it was 3 and 3.
So we
and
still,
then
the
skipped
committee
one.
still agreed 3 each year, then 1 year was off.
So that would be different than what
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
Councilman
think
Scott
the three off is not a good idea.
How does the one in Amarillo that you're proposing, how do they have?
Well, they've had Amarillo's, they were the first home rule city in Texas and in the entire Southwest in 1913. And they didn't change their charter till the 50s. And when they changed, they continued with 5 members, which they have today, all of whom serve 2-year terms and all there's no staggered terms.
Wow.
So they've tried to change that a couple times before, including as recently as 2021. But this commission that I worked with this year put on a proposition that the council went forward with for 4-year terms and staggered terms and increased the size to 7.
And they're pretty big
It's
growing
200
community too, right?
230,000
Amarillo's growing pretty
people,
quick.
so, if I can interrupt now with a little bit of history about our original charter. And I think, Linda, you were around there. Anyway, you can only have, the first charter for a home rule charter in Texas, you must have 5,000 population. Well, in 95, you might not have had 5,000. We were close enough to where the council declared that they wanted a charter and appointed a commission. The original charter has to have a charter commission recommendation, and all the members have to be non-council members, and that's what happened. But as a general law city, which we still have, type A general law cities all over the place, they have 5 members and a mayor. The mayor has veto power, all those kind of things with 2-year terms. And so at that time, Don Gorley was the chairman, I think, and Gordon Holland was the city attorney at the time. Maybe
No, Don was.
Susan was.
Yeah, because Don was
Susan and I
council
worked
person.
with the commission. Gordon had already retired. In any event, sorry. Basically, the charter reflects what general law cities had at the time, which is 2-year terms, 5 members, and a mayor. Mayor only votes in place of a tie. So until 2020 in Bernie, the citizens have never been presented with any other type of government from like 50s. So that one try may not carry a whole lot of weight if you want to do a different proposal. I just want to give you that history.
No, and I'm in agreement that, you know, we tried it once, and I agree with trying again. I agree with 3 years for the reasons stated by many people. A couple people mentioned 4 years. That comes with its own trials. I was the president of the Hill Country Nurse Practitioners Association twice. And, you know, you serve as vice president, president, and immediate past president is how that term works. And we had talked about longer terms as a committee, and one of the biggest reasons that people said no to 4 years was because the possibility of people not being willing or able to commit to 4 years. That's one of the bigger problems I see with 4 years is not just the public opinion, but are people willing to make a 4-year commitment to it? So I think 3 years is more digestible to people who want to step up to run. 4 years might not be as palatable.
I might also add, and Linda and Stan chime in, I think when we did this the last time, we were still in the middle of the pandemic.
I wanted to.
We did our attorney was virtual most of the time, and so as a result, as the committee came and made the charge or the recommendations of council, there probably wasn't a lot of other community engagement that went on prior to the city council or the election.
I'll say one other thing, just talking about the time. The general election versus the May election are 2 different things. I think in November, you're gonna have tons of people that are generally tune out for normal periods of time. They're gonna come in and read a bunch of 13 propositions the city did. I think in May, you're gonna get a more distinct, more specific people that are interested in local elections. It'll be a lot fewer. We've seen that in our election. I mean, I had 7,000 people vote for me and when I ran in that November election, and I think I've got 2,000 or 3,000, not even 3,000 since. So there's a substantial, larger number of people who vote in the general versus in May, and I think a larger number of people that are for an event. I think you're not gonna get people who don't want something, don't go out and vote for it as much as people who are in favor of something. So I think the electorate might be in our favor just by general numbers, people who are supportive of the city amendments. I think you'll get a better number. I don't think it'll be this close going
I
forward.
also think the fact that Frank is running, as we've now all heard, popular guy, I think will do well again. I doubt anyone will run against him, to be honest, and I think he can help push that, whatever we agree on, I think he'll do a great job of that, and I think people listen to you, so I think that also will help.
Yeah.
And it won't be the identical proposition that was put before the public in 2020, it would be altered.
I think
And
it's
that might be
critical,
more palatable.
it's critical that, Frank, that you push it.
Well,
Because there's.
I don't wanna bring it up, so.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that the opinion of some is that it's self-serving for the council to push it, even though it affects you too.
Right.
I'm just
Also,
saying.
the city has done an outstanding job over the past year of engaging on social media. And I think that publicizing it in bites, like every week of, hey, this is something that this group is talking about, and here's why, and here's the popular opinion, what do you think? And, kind of like a sound off thing.
So I will say,
Are we allowed to do
there's
that?
very clear, we have to be very careful on what we can communicate
Right.
Okay,
per state law, but you as appointed, as elected official and appointed members of, from the community, you're able to go do things on your own, on
Okay.
your own channels, but as a city, we can only do factual information. Hey, we can say the committee met on these dates, they talked about these things, they made this recommendation, so you can click here to watch that meeting. Here's
well, okay,
right.
even doing something like that, people are watching, I guess my point is, people are watching more.
Right.
As far as our city, our social media engagement and our engagement on the city website. And publicizing it more and, providing that link, hey, click here to see what they talked about.
But there's another issue though, is that our council, the way it's constructed right now, we are also the utility board. And that is not true in every city. First of all, not every city this size even has a utility. Secondly, even in larger cities, the city council is not the utility board. There's an independent utility board that is maybe politically appointed or even elected or some combination thereof. And I have come to learn, I think we've all come to learn, that utilities are not a minor issue. And we may not deal with them every moment of the day, but everything we do often ties back to water, power, sewer, stormwater. It always comes into this. And so it's actually even more reason why we need to alter terms, because it's not just learning the political stuff, you're also learning the reality of the utility board, for which you're responsible.
The charter can create a utility.
I would be highly opposed to that.
I think-
You didn't want to say that.
The language, I think our charter actually says the council serves as a
Yeah.
utility.
You have to amend that.
Every time I've ever seen that happen, not good.
Kerrville's the biggest.
Kyle, do you have a question?
No, I was gonna make a similar comment to Quentin, that the timing of that, with the general election and people's bad taste in people's mouth with national politics and term limits and things like that. I can't remember which way I voted, but I know I'm not in favor of, or I'm in favor of term limits, for national positions.
Well, your point about major, I remember distinctly this last election, I knocked on a neighbor's door not far from me. It's an older gentleman, I say older, I'm old, but older than me. And he said, well, I don't pay much attention to local elections. I generally pay attention to national elections. I said, I understand that. I said, but when's the last time the president or the governor knocked on your door? So I'm your city councilman, I'm right here in front of you. He said, you're right. I think that's to your point about May, the people who care, I don't mean the other people don't care, but they only don't care if the water doesn't come on, or there's a pothole in the street, and be honest, I mean, that's reality. The people that show up in May care about the city, for good or bad, they care about the city. And I think it should be in May, because November you get too much of what you just said, too much, I hate government, so I'm voting against everything.
And Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, there are only the 2 dates that you could hold for these elections. May and November.
So
So we in agreement that we want to try to move forward with changing an amendment to 3-year terms?
Yes.
Staggered.
There's consensus.
Staggered, yeah, staggered.
2-2-1s. 2-2-2.
2-2-2-1 with one with the mayor.
Maybe, since we're all here talking, maybe you go ahead and have a motion and second there and talk about it.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to read what we're going to motion about?
Yeah.
We move for 3-year terms
Okay.
with staggered elections, 2-2-2.
There you go. Motion from Councilman
I
Macaluso.
second it. Or he seconds.
Second from Councilman Wilson.
I'll third it.
Need a vote? Council members?
Aye.
Alright. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody.
Well, everybody can vote on it.
Everybody.
Oh, everybody can vote, sorry.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
So can I just ask Mick, from a legal perspective, to clarify, we put in the language which, we said which districts were gonna be on which year or whatnot. How does that happen if we get propose this and it gets approved? We can do that now, or we can do it even after the
You
election.
can do it either way. You can actually put it in the proposition of which districts will be in 2025 election and how many, which districts in 2026, and so forth. Or you can just say 2 seats shall be up in this year and then so forth. And then if it passes, then the council by ordinance can draw straws and put the numbers in. Now, that issue came up in Amarillo, of course, and the city's, the Secretary of State agreed with that. But I would want to double check that now because sometimes they are a little fishy.
Well, I was curious, like, let's say, well,
You got 3 up for election next year anyway.
right, well, yeah, what would happen?
You just have 2 next year.
Well, if I pulled the straw to be
Right.
the last one, then do I stand for?
I would think that if we were to pick, I would say the 2 that are going up for election in May should be later
Well, what I'm
on.
saying is next year, there's 3 no matter what, because you don't know if
Yeah.
it's gonna pass. 3 of you are.
So if we go on 3-year terms,
Yeah.
me or Sharon, assuming we both run for re-election, one of us would be a 2-year term, the other one would be a 3-year term. That's the only way to start it.
You can do that.
You could,
Yeah,
You could.
you- as a council,
We
would
could
have to
propose it that way.
figure
We
that out.
can figure out the logistics, but I
We
would
can
not
figure that out
recommend
later.
putting, I would
Yeah,
recommend putting it in the language on the proposition.
There's a question that you need to know more about your electorate, like we were saying. The wording makes a difference because the first question's gonna be, well, who's gonna get 3 years and who's gonna get 2 years? So you may wanna consider putting it in
Well,
It's
can
a-
you make it contiguous with the election? In other words,
You can't pass before it passes.
well, I'm saying if it passes, it's a 3-year term. If it doesn't pass, it's a 2-year term.
Right, but if we're gonna do
You still have
staggered,
3
we can't
people.
so us 3 are up for election. You can't stagger it if we
I got
get
you.
a
So
3-year
somebody's
term.
gotta be 2 years. Okay.
So, and one of y'all 2 will have to get a 3rd year.
Well, if you're gonna keep running for mayor, it should be you, because nobody's gonna run against you, so just make him.
Robert, what's your thoughts? Okay, thoughts?
Well, I mean, I voted in the affirmative, but I was thinking that if we were talking about commissioners court, I'd sure love some 2-year terms over there right now.
there. Well, let me mention something that we haven't talked about and should, probably before we voted. When you have a 2-year term under the Texas Constitution, if there's a vacancy, and we talk about that in the charter, then that seat can be appointed by the council until the next election. If you have a 3-year or 4-year term, you gotta have a special election, there's no appointment. Unless it's within a year of that term being up, if there's a vacancy.
Would it be possible for the council then to take one of the 3 and extend their term without having to go for an election?
I believe so. I believe they can. And so, I just want to make it clear that filling vacancies is different with a
Right.
3-year than a 2.
Right, so if it's in year 1 or 2, or in year 1, basically,
Yeah.
if someone has to drop out, we have to have a special election.
That's
Or
right.
After year 2, we have a year, we're gonna make that appointment.
That's right, and that's one of the only real differences, and that's the Texas Constitution.
So no appointment availability in a 3-year,
Right.
Oh,
Well,
listed the last year.
Last year, if it's in the last year of the,
just-
Right now, we're limited by, we can do 1 appointment, but then
If there's two vacancies, you
Right,
gotta
the
have.
second, you gotta do it anyway, so we kinda have that situation for a second.
Yeah, and that's another example of how general law cities work, that's, yeah.
If that changes anybody's opinion of what we just voted on,
I didn't think it would, but I thought you better know.
I appreciate it, Nick. Thank you. Okay. We're gonna move on for a minute.
In that same section, we talked about, well,
I did have a question about that. Is that, because we changed that with the charter in 2020 to correspond, it said to state law, I believe. Is that state law, 6 months and 21 years of age, and 12 months and 21 years of age? Or is that odd?
I don't believe residency is state law.
Because I think 6 months is too
There can
short.
be
what was the
different residency
proposition? Do you have a
requirements.
proposition for that?
21 is state law?
Exact proposition?
Is that,
You're saying you don't have to be a resident of the city to be on the city council?
No, you do, we're talking about the number of months.
Oh, the number of months.
A minimum number.
Okay.
Isn't it mere
And this
general
one,
law?
we're gonna admit the residency.
Yeah,
I just think 6 months is too
Yeah,
short.
the number selection.
well, I think we have some discretion there, but I'll double check to make sure before the
I mean,
next.
6 months, you haven't even been through a whole season of drought and freeze.
Hold on, before we get too far on, Kyle's got a question.
Oh, I'm
I'm just curious, have y'all looked at any growth models for Bernie? And is it, if this is the section where you limit, or you identify the number of council members, have y'all looked at growth projections, and does it make sense to increase it from 5 to?
So we're about 23,000 people right now, maybe 24. We, on average, about 5% a year, so maybe another 1,000 a year. I think we could get up to 30, 32, 33 without expanding our city limits. We're pretty much landlocked by special utility districts, so we're really not gonna grow beyond the 12 square miles, really. So I imagine we're gonna probably not be greater than 30 to 35 until Esperanza, which has an agreement when they, you know, they automatically annex in at some point, probably 30 years from now.
And do we know roughly what the population is within everyone's district?
Just
Is it
reapportionment.
manageable?
You know, it's just reapportionment. I think it's roughly about 3,000.
That was the
How,
only.
you know how many people are
I'll
in each
just give
district?
one thought. Extending it would give people an idea that we have some hot egg butter deal going on. I think we go after this endorsed by the mayor and win it, because, you know, that's why we all talked about 4, but we said, man, I think we win 3. I know we win 3 just as a vote of confidence because of the mayor. Remember, when we were doing this, there was not, and I think Tim would even agree with me, was, you know, his approval rating was going down. And so I do think that had a lot to do with us not winning. But I have a lot of concern of increasing from 5 to 7, because we gotta win this first, and then we can talk about that.
I will tell you, because we are a district city of our size, going to 7, and adding another one, and then you'd have the mayor vote, I would tell you there's some value in having a mayor that doesn't vote. Who can facilitate the political conversations in a way that I can't or shouldn't even, right? So, but most cities, when you get to about 20 to 30,000, you might have 7 council members, but the mayor votes.
Yeah, that's common.
Right now, we just did the reapportionment. It was about, because my district was the largest. I had like up 5,000 people, and then when it got restructured, I think it was 3,500. So, I mean, each district's probably in the 3,000 plus or minus range, somewhere in that, something to that effect.
I would tell you on Proposition C, the ballot language is an amendment to the city's home rule charter, amending the eligibility requirements for the offices of mayor and council member for alignment and consistency with the Constitution and state law. I think there might have been some differences between the mayor and city council that we aligned.
That's
Does
what I
that
was
ring a
asking.
bell?
Is that
For the mayor, it's
residency
60
term in
years.
the Constitution, the state constitution, or is that just something we know?
I don't remember, we don't have that back.
Well, I'll take the other side of that, because if you don't wanna vote for the person that's been here for 7 months and ran for city council, don't vote for them. I personally ran for city council at 11 months, and I lost to Sharon, who had been here about the same amount of time.
I understand.
I mean, neither one of us would have run.
I understand, I
Right,
just
if
think
that
it
would've
would,
been
it would
approved.
give you pause to kind of.
It's kind of one of those things that I run into in the community though, right? It's, oh, well, I've been here longer, so I care about the community longer.
Yeah.
I don't think that that should be a rule, right? And it drives me crazy if somebody says, well, I've been here for 25 years, well, I've been here for 18, and I see those people argue.
That's not
Like,
exactly my
I
point.
care just as much.
That wasn't my point
No,
about
I'm
who cares
sure.
more. My point is that if you just moved here 6 months ago from Boston or from California.
Then don't vote for that person.
I
But I
understand
moved
that.
here from Central Texas.
Well, I think you're
forever.
offending because you guys ran that. I think Joe's point is someone moves here and maybe isn't as committed as you are and is just instantly mad and said, I'm gonna run. Well, they haven't really given them their chance to like be part of the community. You're right that you could leave that to the voters, but I get Joe's point.
I just think if it's 12 months for the mayor, I don't know why it's not 12 months for a council member. Because the council member, the mayor doesn't vote on anything unless it's a tie. The council is what votes on stuff. So if the mayor has to be here 12 months, why shouldn't the council member be here 12 months? That's just my thought. I mean, you know, I don't care, but I mean,
The 6-month rule is state law.
Okay,
It's gotta
that's
be-
it.
And you have the power in the charter, because the state law says, or is otherwise prescribed by law, to change that to 12 months if you want. But state minimum is 6 months. In the state, you have to have resided in Texas for 12 months, period.
right.
And in the district you're running from, or in the city you're running from for 6 months.
So that's 18 months in Texas.
No, not
No?
Yeah, I think part of that 12 months is at 6
Just
months.
6.
So
And
state
you can
law-
live in Dallas,
so there
state
is
law
leeway
a
to change it.
minimum.
Minimum 12 months in Texas and minimum 6 months where you're running from, and 18 years of age. Now, we've got 21 in here.
I'll take 21 over 18.
But you can change it to 12, it sounds like.
Well, I would prefer to change to 25, but that's, that mirrors.
No, no, no. Not 12 years, city council.
Oh, right.
Residency.
No, but I think 12 months is what it should be. I just think it should be consistent, that's all.
And you have to be a registered voter, that's it.
My 2 cents.
If it had been 12 months back when Sharon and Joe ran, we wouldn't have had any candidates. I've always been amazed at the long-term Bernie residents who do not engage with their government. So I don't know if you reward them and make it easier for them to become a councilman if they're not willing to do what these two had to do to get that seat.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a good point, because Nina ran for, she left her council seat to run for mayor, and so you're right, there would have been
But
potentially no candidates.
But the assumption is no one was gonna run, and I don't think that would have been the case.
Maybe not, but they had the opportunity to run, and I think it would have been really easy for someone in that district who is a long-term resident, somebody say here greater than 10 years.
In general, I would say more candidates being involved in the process is probably better, and let the voters decide who the best candidate is. And if that means, you allow people who have been here for 6 months to be a candidate, then so be it. If that candidate came from California and had ill intentions, I think I would uncover that pretty quickly. I know the community would uncover it pretty quickly, and we would know, and they wouldn't get any votes.
No, again, just think it should be consistent with the mayor. I don't see why it needs to be any different, but that's just me. Because it could say the same thing for the mayor. You know,
Maybe we should.
Well, and I'll be totally candid here, right? So when people approached me and said, hey, we want you to be involved, I had been here for 11 months, and the PAC that came and approached me said, well, darn, I wish you'd have been here 12 months, you could have run for mayor. And we would have supported you for mayor. Right? So, I mean, you know,
I realize. I'm just talking as a citizen, I think it's good to have had a year in a community where you've paid taxes, you've been through the seasons, you've been through the school year, you've been through the whole thing, to get a real feel for where you are, that's all. That's just me. And that-
That's why we want 3 years terms. That's another reason for us to need longer terms.
but I don't know the numbers, but I would go out, venture to guess that in all the elections in the history of Bernie, no one's been elected that's been here for 6 months or less. Like every person that's been elected probably was here for at least a year.
Probably.
I think we've had some that were just 6
Close.
months.
Just at 6 months?
And you have to remember, the mayor's position though is different than the council members. He doesn't vote, which is true, but he has to have the knowledge and the ability to work with everybody and the wherewithal to understand what my role is and step into different places. Someone 6 months probably wouldn't be able to do that. 12 months is why they plug that in for mayor. You know, a council member coming in, they may not have any ill will towards the city. They're just anxious to be a part of their community. Why not? You might be missing out on that candidate.
Well, it's also, I think, a little differently because of the district spots. They have a little more microscopic area that they're familiar with and need to be concerned about. As if they were all at large, right, new to the community, that may have a different.
Make a bigger impact then.
But to Linda's point, the mayor, he's involved in a lot of community partner meetings. He has to represent the city and other local government entities, regional things, and so you're right, there's probably a lot more that mayor has to be somewhat familiar with stepping into that
I
role.
mean, from a politician running against someone who's only been here 6 months, it's much easier.
Well, no, I agree with what you're saying.
You know, there's always many, I guess we went to districts in 2011 or 12. Before that, it was all at large. And there was some pretty heavy-duty recruitment. Some of you guys, Ron, you were probably recruited pretty heavy to run back in those days, weren't you?
You were that much
Just,
candidate?
No, I was, the first time.
First year?
because they had to fill the spots, and that's why you had some long-term council members as well. Maybe different now with the districts and the longer term might make more sense, because you have a smaller group of volunteers in each district.
I take your back, I wasn't.
Okay.
No, we,
Move back.
before I got on, the city voted to move to single-member districts, then we got involved in a lawsuit, and then we had to, the mayor and I and the other council members at that time, and this is so ancient history now, but we had to go out and do our own little road show and push for the vote.
Yeah.
And it won by large margins, but I don't remember what those numbers were, but I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 80-20, maybe 70-30, somewhere in there. It was.
Well, we had the cumulative voting, which was wildly unpopular.
Yeah.
So it helped pass the districts.
So no changes in 3.03 then? In regards to the residency of 6 months and 12 months? All right. Let's move on to section 3.04, judge of qualifications. City council is the final judge of all elections and the qualifications of its members and any other elected official in the city. Section 3.0, any questions with that one?
Just have one question to Nick. What does that mean? I mean, it's very vague, actually.
That appears in nearly every organic document, including city charters for elected officials, because the council decides who won the election and who's to be seated, and also decides if somebody can no longer serve, like, for instance, they've lost their mental acuity or.
I understand.
So that's all that really means.
Okay. You can't unseat somebody that was elected.
Um, You deem that they were unqualified for whatever reason.
The only people that could would be the council.
That's why I was wondering, what does that mean?
And it says other elected officials, we don't have any, but some cities have elected municipal judge or elected, you know, something else.
Good. Joe?
Angelito, I was saying that,
So
Joe Angelito.
Well, that was a different situation. I guess it's like impeachment, I don't know.
Close.
I get it. Just wondered what-
There's actually some information in state statutes about that.
All right, moving on, section 3.05, compensation. Members of the city council shall serve with such compensation as may be determined by the council. An increase in compensation shall not be effective until the date of commencement of terms of office of the council members or mayor elected at the next scheduled regular election. The policy regulating payment of expenses incurred in performance of official duty shall be determined by the council. So I know this was a subject that we talked about back in June. Anybody want to open that up for discussion, whether we should increase the stipends?
I didn't realize that we can do it outside, I mean, this gives us the power to do it at any time, I didn't realize that. Well, one, I think what we talked about, discussed, was that we're not gonna get to a point where it's gonna encourage other people to vote, that's not our goal, right? We're all doing this, to help our community, not necessarily for money, but it hasn't been changed in however many years, so going up $100 or around there, just to help kind of balance the costs we do accrue, from coffee or gas, whatever it is, I would definitely be in support of that.
You have the authority with this to establish the stipends for expenses or your compensation on a monthly basis, but you would be doing that during the budget process. One of the reasons that we looked at this in 2020 is, if I'm not mistaken, they had a flat fee in there and that was it, and it was never adjusted.
That's what it still is. It's still, it's just a flat fee.
Well, no, it was designated in the charter, the amount,
Got it.
and it's gone.
So Meg, me ask, says the policy regulating payment of expenses incurred in performance, that's it, for reimbursement of things. I was gonna say, so if they don't have, they need to take, they wanna adjust the stipend, they have to take that to the voters, correct?
It's not how it reads.
No.
No, this says that the
But then it has that
council, under this
second-
charter, the council has that authority to set.
So, but then it says an increase in compensation shall not be effective until the date. So
So
we
if
have
we
to run
increase,
again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so if we
next
increased our
term.
pay at the next council
Yeah,
meeting,
we don't get
it
it.
wouldn't happen until after the.
Re-elect, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also have to do that
You're-
during the budget process.
Right.
Yes, you would be effective after May, mine would be effective after the following year, so, isn't that right?
Or is it after the next election?
After,
I think it would be after your term. so
after
it'd
the
be
term's up
after
in
your-
that's what I mean.
2026,
That's the way I read it.
right, right.
Commencement of the terms of office.
Yes. Well, I was in favor of making adjustments to that, but you're right, I guess I didn't read that close enough, but it looks like we already have that ability, so I wouldn't take something to the voters for a specific dollar amount, because we just need to adjust that later on, I think it's great as it is.
I think next
So
budget
then
cycle.
start going through the budget process.
Yep.
And start
Absolutely, I
talking
think
about it.
we can talk about that under council and make
Well, I
a
can
change.
assure you, it won't be as difficult as raising your salary to $100,000 a year.
And we're not going 100,000? What? Come on.
No comment, observation.
Okay, all right, well then I guess we can move on from the 3.05, no any more questions on the compensation matter.
I guess
Section, go ahead, Sharon.
one double advocate question. Because of what you had just mentioned, is it a good idea for council to, get together and, present a vote to give themselves a pay raise? Or should it be, suggested that it be a voter, decision?
I don't think it needs to be a voter decision because we're getting voted in, so if someone doesn't like the decision they make, they can go to the ballot box and vote for someone else.
There's no way it can be a voter decision without
And
amending
it's
the
not a
charter.
pay increase, it's a stipend increase. It's a lot different than.
And what there would be is a discussion at council, if we, you know, either you do it in the budget process or we amend the budget and there's council action.
I would suggest your finance director advocate and show what other cities are doing and make that presentation
Right.
and include it in the
Right,
budget.
exactly, yeah, definitely do it very transparent in front of the.
Right. Well, 250 to 350 versus 85,000 to 100,000. In the commissioner report, as an example, my guess is outside of the same 12 people on Bernie Informed Citizens, that most people would understand that, so.
I can assure you they won't understand.
No, they won't.
Those outside, besides.
We should be paying them.
What was
And
the,
we have done some of that research, Lori's done, it's, as you can imagine, all over the place, because cities are, have all kinds of factors involved, but.
when was that stipend put in, roughly? 1995 with the charter or?
Probably.
original?
Yeah, the original charter had a
It's never
stipend.
changed.
No, it hasn't changed. So just with the inflation calculator, if you want to go there, it should be, considerably more than that. Considerably more than $150 or $200 though.
I think it
Well, that's a
has
discussion we
changed.
can have later
It
on
was
through
150.
the budget process.
That's what it is.
Flat.
That's what it
Still
is.
still there.
It's
Okay, it's 200 for
Right,
May.
it's been the same forever, that's what
That's
I'm
what I'm saying,
saying.
that's a discussion now that we realize that,
So we gave you the leverage and y'all didn't do anything.
They never did anything.
Right.
yeah. We should have been more clear back in 2020 with that.
Missed that memo.
Right? All right, moving on to section 3.06, any concerns about what's written there for the mayor? I don't have any changes that need to be made there.
When's the last time we had a veto? We got one on the,
Dan Heckler,
Dan
Heckler,
Heckler's veto?
Heckler did two of them.
On the 2011, the one he did where it was a
Yeah,
holiday and we couldn't
it
override.
impacted him personally.
I was here, so it was like when I first got here, so it'd have been 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
And that was, I think was the only veto we had ever had. I don't know if things have changed. I was the first in the history.
Maybe we're due for one, you know.
And that is another carryover from general law.
Yes.
That's exactly what general law says.
All right. All right, how about section 3.07, mayor pro tem was amended by, this was amended back in 2020, so.
You have a question, I gotta go back, I'm sorry. This is my legal brain, although I'm not a lawyer. If the mayor can't vote on an ordinance, and the council passes an ordinance, say 5-0, but the mayor can veto it, then he is voting.
Well,
So what happens?
actually, the word veto is probably wrong. What it really is the mayor can require reconsideration. And that's what the case law talks about, is those terms. Everybody calls it a veto. And we
So he's basically deferring it for another,
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
and there's a
wait.
time limit, so the
3
council
days.
has to meet and vote on it again in that time limit, or else it's not passed.
The last paragraph addresses that, the last sentence in the paragraph addresses that.
Yeah, it's not a,
See, reconsidered at the next regular.
next really council, yeah, I have 3 days to
Requires a
file an
majority.
official saying, I'm not gonna sign this basically, and here's my reason why. And then when it comes back at the next council meeting, it needs a 4/5 vote to pass.
And it has to be soon, I mean, the next,
The
real
very
soon
next,
meeting,
which is
yeah.
2 weeks.
okay.
So he doesn't really vote, he just requires reconsideration.
Tell you, put your thinking cap on, Joe.
Well, I'm just trying to understand it, because the reason I'm saying this is not, I think just our council functions very well. But I can foresee, and I'm always thinking down the road, we're not gonna be around here forever, so I'm just like, what's gonna happen when we get to have 50,000 people in the area, or 100,000 that all think they live in Bernie, but they don't, and we have all this stuff going on, and we get some contention. Just wanna make sure that we understand what that means.
Appreciate it. All right, section 3.07, mayor pro tem. Like I said, this was already amended back in 2020. Any concerns on that section? Moving on to section 3.08, vacancies, forfeitures of office. Put in vacancies as amended by voters. Again, this was just amended 4 years ago.
Does that have to be rewritten though if we do 3 years?
That will have to be rewritten.
Yes,
I'll
and we
call you
would
back,
probably, we could draft the language to make it clear that it's filled in accordance with the Texas election code.
But does forfeiture have to be rewritten? Not forfeiture.
Probably not.
The filling may be, but not the forfeiture.
I haven't studied it, but probably not. I mean, you can include all those things to forfeit.
I don't see anything that designates
It has nothing to
a
do with the
period
term.
of time for the term that would cause you to have to amend it.
And we know from Joe's case, if you leave the district, Brian Fowler, same thing, if you leave the district, you can't be on the council. Bryce, yeah, same thing.
Well, we need to, at what point would you have to modify C where it says we are appointed one within 30 days? Would we just do that after the, if the new charter amendment goes, then we just make another charter amendment after that? How would we go
No,
about
we
doing this?
we would draft the propositions to make it clear that,
This is amended as well?
yes.
Okay.
And that's a little tricky, but we can do it.
Sounds
Yeah, all at once.
complicated, but yeah, okay.
So we good on variances, forfeits of office and the vacancies? What about section 3.09 prohibitions? Again, that was just amended in 2020. It's saying you can't serve two masters.
That's correct. We might do that pretty clear. I have a question. Because I know we went through this with 9 and all. Do you have to, I know some places you don't, do you have to resign to run for another position? Or can you hold your position and then if you lose, you still got your position, but how does that work in town? I don't know that with law.
It depends on the office you're announcing for, or say you're gonna run for, and how long you have left in the term of this office. If you have less than a term left in your city council office and you announce for another job, it's inconsistent with the city council office, you probably could continue to serve. But there are some positions where you can't serve. You have to check with the Constitution. So if you announce for another office, you need to check that because
I'm not running for anything. I'm just
because you may unwillingly or unwittingly resign your council seat by saying I'm running for some statewide office, for instance.
All right, moving on to section 3.10, meetings and procedures, again amended just 4 years ago. Any questions or concerns on that section?
Mayor, have you looked at the resolution regarding the rules and order of business to see if it needs to be updated?
Which one?
The resolution that determined our rules of order.
What do we call that, our
Decorum or.
Decorum.
council's decorum rules?
Yeah, that was approved when handwritten.
Okay, so you have updated since I.
Yeah. No concerns on section 3.10 then? Section 3.11 on ordinances. That's kind of a lengthy one, so that's all we read.
Is there any issues with ordinances that as we move them forward?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Good on ordinances, exacting clause. Moving on to city secretary, we got a lot of discussion about this one. Any concerns on, under CD and D under city secretary?
C and D are actually part of the field.
Yeah.
ordinances. City secretary is the finishing of the same last sentence.
All right, then, let's go to section 3.12, council investigations. No questions, concerns on that one?
You've had
Is that-
your-
Does that assume unanimous inquiry among all council members?
It's a good question. This question, is that unanimous, so all council members have to have
Is it, can one person?
file for
To call for an investigation. Nick, what do you think there? So the trigger for calling an investigation?
The council.
I believe it's the council as a
Yeah,
whole.
it's not an individual council member.
No.
The council.
Council has to vote to pull.
Take
Yes.
Majority vote to,
Yeah, we would have to vote to initiate.
So I imagine that would be put on the agenda as a discussion item.
Right.
Well, my question is, if it's a legal matter, shouldn't it first be an executive session before you even decide what
Yeah.
you're gonna do? Because
Well, if you can, I mean, if the investigation's about the duties, responsibilities of an officer or employee, this is broader though. It could be.
I understand that, but I'm saying when you're just first doing the inquiry, before you besmirch your employee or a fellow elected official or someone's reputation publicly, shouldn't you at least have an executive session to determine the legality of what the issue is before you go into public?
And you could do it under personnel, right?
I'm just saying,
Just
because
depends on-
the minute you go out there and say there's a question about so-and-so doing such and such, 20% of people already think that person's a criminal
Yeah,
or a bum.
yeah, we would, we're talking about some misconduct by
I understand, but I'm just
officer or
saying,
employee, we would want to do that in executive session.
just at least initially.
Hey, Mick, is there, or maybe are you aware of a more modern best practice version of what they
No,
want
this
to
is
do?
good.
This is good?
Yeah, and nearly every charter has this. Some of them do go into more detail about contempt power, but this gives the council authority by ordinance to say, when we issue subpoenas, if somebody doesn't comply with the subpoena, it's gonna be $1,000 a day or something.
Sure.
So this is more flexible, actually.
So if we're good with section 3, does anybody need to take a break? Take a 5-minute recess, restroom break, anybody?
Would you like a break?
No.
That's
I'm still gonna, I'm good. I'm just asking, want to make sure.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, well then, fine, moving on to section 4 of the charter. Elections, section 4.01, elections amended, again, just amended in 2020. Various elections shall be held annually on the first Saturday in May or at such other times may be specified by state law, at which time officers will be elected to fill those offices which become vacant that year. The city council shall conduct all elections consistent with requirements of state law. Pretty cut and dry.
That was a good change, because we had different things in here before that came in conflict with the new
It's
state
state law.
laws.
Okay. And then section 4.05, candidates elected as members, again, vote amended to 2020. I'll let y'all read that and see if we need to make any changes there.
Quentin, you must have a tie.
Yeah, we could have cast lots.
Yeah.
Draw swords.
I was gonna say, no,
It's a
duly,
duel.
duly under the oaths.
And it wasn't that long ago where I saw on one of the YouTube channels that a council position was decided by throwing dice on the podium.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Casting lots.
Casting lots.
Yeah. That's
Choose
great.
your weapons.
Fist or knives. All right, again, I think that's pretty well worded and pretty cut and dry there. I don't think we need to make any changes there. Anybody else?
That is consistent with state law, right, Nick?
Yes, I think that was the reason for the change.
Yeah, I think everything, all the changes were basically bringing us up to be in concurrent with state law. So, I mean, those were the two main sections that we really wanted to tackle tonight for the first meeting. Again, you want to go through any other sections. If you have a section that you want to bring up at the next meeting, by all means, just let us know so we can get it out to every member of the committee so they can kind of think on it.
Let me suggest, Mayor, if we are gonna meet next Tuesday, we've got the one item the committee agreed, you got a week to think about it, see if there's any other questions with it. Go through the charter, see if there's in this section you would like the mayor to facilitate a conversation. Lori sent out the NLC, what they call it, best practice or model charter. NLC is National League of Cities, it's like the Texas Municipal League for the country. And they represent cities of all sizes and scales, and, so you can look and see what they think. I haven't spent a lot of time in that document, but you might see something you wonder about, or you can ask Mick next Tuesday, or have a conversation here if it makes sense to include somewhere.
Just as we talked about it before, are we no longer thinking about term limits? 'Cause I'm just wondering where we are on that, just so I can get my brain around
Okay,
that.
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we'll pose it to the community. What's your thoughts on, do we, as we're going with the extension of terms, do we want to try to put term limits or not put term limits on it, which is a great, thanks for reminding me, Tommy. Because there's pros and cons to the idea of term limits, you know, and I will say Dr. Mack brought up a good point. This was one of the first elections that was contested in all three races, but lots of times, there's been lots of races where nobody's been contested, but also when nobody's, you have to go out and try to find someone to come and run.
Been a lot of elections that have been canceled because no one chose to run.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and I've said this before, because, and I'm in a different situation because I'm retired, I don't have a bunch of plot. But regardless of the fee, it's not gonna be much. So if it's 150, maybe it's 300 or 200 or whatever. Very few people are gonna run for this position for the salary or the stipend. That's not gonna happen. Might run for county commission for $100 grand a year, might, but you're not gonna run for city council or mayor for 150, 200 bucks a month. That's not a motivation at all. I think most of us would be here if you weren't paid anything. And so you're not gonna be able to raise the salary. It will not be palatable to this voting populace to raise the salary for a councilman or mayor sufficiently to make that attractive enough for people to run. So therefore, in that case, although I generally am in favor of term limits in Washington, I don't think term limits are good locally. Because the people who are here want to be here. They're not doing it for the money, despite what you may hear about under the table bullshit and all that stuff. Nobody's here for the money. That's just my thought. Otherwise, I generally kind of agree with term limits in some way, but I just think locally, I mean, what's the longest anyone's ever served? I mean, really.
Or,
The mayor was 20 years.
Yeah.
yeah, RL.
RL Bean was.
RL and mayor.
Stafford served until almost as long.
But I mean, in the modern era, I think
And
that
so-
is not likely.
Ben
No, not
was,
quite as long.
the RL was the winner.
That's just my 2 cents.
I don't think it's been a problem. I don't think it's favorable term limits.
I think if we can,
Especially if we
part of the thought
three.
process is that maybe people wouldn't vote on extension of the term without a term limit. So I think that was kind of what we talked about, but with that is that I think if the messaging is on point with the terms, and again, in May with Frank, that kind of changes that, but that was the thought process, was like, some of the people I know might have wanted, been like, well, okay, if you're gonna limit the, how long they can do it, but then it's also like, those same people would probably only want 2, and really, I feel like 3 is probably the number anyway, so at that point.
I just cannot imagine you would knock out somebody that's served the community for a long period of time, still willing to serve, his voters want him there, and you're limited by some rule that says you can't. It's just a limiting factor. I'm not in favor of term limits.
And I would have to say, you have to go back and look at how many unopposed elections there were. If that was the only candidate, you've kicked him out. Now, you can get someone else that, if you go out and beat the bushes, you can get someone else to run in that position, and it's a given. Is that really the right thing to do? You've lost your continuity and education and experience for someone brand new?
Right, because you said 6 years was long enough.
Yeah.
The other piece is, again, we're not all that large. If we're all that large, maybe there's a term limit piece, but the districts are very small in population base as well, so just another factor.
I think at the end of the day, the voters are who speak. And so if the constituents of the city don't want somebody in a position for, 5, 10, 15 years, then they won't vote for them again.
And they'll put up a candidate to run against them.
Right.
And if that person is really doing that bad, that other candidate's going to get the position.
Well, we kind of saw that in the last election.
It was 2 votes, okay?
I didn't mean it that way, Quinn. I meant there were same signs by 3 different groups.
You finally got your straight man.
If I was in your district, I'd have voted for you.
That'd been pretty.
We're young, we're still young with the district
Yeah.
setup, you know, I mean, it's still only 12 years we've done.
Another thing I need to just, I know I shared with council, but a new bill that came out of our last legislative session that says for cities with districts, the moment you do a new census count and relook at the boundaries, every council spot's up for that next election.
That's right.
And then, after that, then they go back to whatever your charter says on.
Yeah, and then you have staggered for new.
Staggered after that.
It's a pain.
So that's every 10 years we're doing
Yeah.
census notes.
So we're good to 23rd.
It's good. And actually, we won't get the numbers till 31 or 32. I won't be, so probably 32.
And then whatever staggered pattern gets established now would be reset again.
Under
in
that
10
new
years.
statute, which was just adopted, yes.
Kinda interesting.
If it's, well, I don't know how exactly.
It's all new, no one's ever done it yet, just
Right.
about the last session, we'll
Right, yeah.
see what happens between now and 2031.
10 years now.
I
See
think
what
if I
other
change
cities
your
do
mind,
it and how it
redo it.
works.
It may change again in 2
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
They're, Austin's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's.
Any other questions, any other thoughts? So if you can, if you want to, I encourage you to go through the charter, top, front, and back, look it over, make sure, we don't want to do this every year, you know, so if there is something that, you want to bring up, make sure to bring it up, and we are good for November 5th then, election night?
It's
It's up to you guys,
That's what
right.
it is, yeah. We haven't penciled in, so.
Well, I don't wanna sit home and watch that election.
We won't know the official count until.
We'll be
all the
done by
ballots-
8.
Yeah, it could be a quick meeting if we got nothing else to look at.
Celebration or the.
I mean, it'll get to these 6 or 7 times.
Until later.
Really, the next meeting is gonna be a confirmation of what you guys decided today, and if there's anything else.
Any kind of new business, yeah. All right, I just want to say thank you all, everybody here, for your time. I know it's taken away from your families and other events and stuff, so I appreciate your love for the community and for the city and your efforts for being here. So we'll see y'all in a week.
There's one last thing, for those that haven't done this before, I know some of us have. The most important part of this is the wording.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest.
And we'll work on it.
That's why they make the big bucks, right?